You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, your weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a guest here with me today to chat about her book. So I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself and let you know where you can find her online if you'd like to connect.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Kimberly Sherman-Cook, and I am the author of In the Shadow of 13 Moons. You can find me online at kimberlyshermancook.com. I'm also on Facebook if you want to look me up there. And I have a YouTube channel as well, where I do a little bit of tarot revolving around the shadow. And that is also under my own name. So it's under Kimberly Sherman-Cook.
Perfect. Listeners, I will have everything linked over in the show notes as always, so you can check that out. So let us chat then about your book. Let's start there.
Okay, good places to start.
So what
Go ahead.
can people expect? What is this about? If they aren't familiar with this, because some people might be.
Yeah, some people might be. The first release of the book was in 2010, so it has been circulating for a little while. And then Crossed Crow came up to me and kind of said, like, hey, we'd love to bring this work back. We think it's important to be out there. And I was thrilled. So I agreed, of course. And in the process of our conversations, I had told them that I really wanted to kind of rewrite some of what was in there, not necessarily to remove anything. We actually didn't remove anything. But just, I feel like everyone, as they go along in their practice, you evolve and you change and you learn new things and you, kind of tweak old things. And there was some things that I felt like either could have more explanation or new things I had discovered that I was like, oh, I would love to include these. There were also some other things that didn't get into the first book for various reasons, mostly revolving around publishing. So it was a great opportunity to put those back into the book. So it was I had a lot of fun, actually. They gave me a lot of control over this version of the book that's coming out. And so I'm really excited to see it hit the market and to give people sort of a fresh set of eyes. The book itself is all about working with your shadow, working with the dark moon, and really reconnecting with that sort of lost piece of ourselves. It's become more popular in the last, I'd say, like 10 years for people to kind of delve into that. But prior to that, there really wasn't a lot of material out there surrounding that topic and that subject. And I think it's a really important piece of paganism and witchcraft in general. We talk a lot about balance, but for me, my journey kind of started there. Like there was an imbalance, if you will, for me in my practice. And it couldn't always be about the full moon and all of that fun energy, which is fabulous fun energy. But there felt like there was something missing. And so the book really explores that side of the world. So working with that deeper self, that reflective self, and coming to a place of balance and not necessarily repeating those cycles that tend to lead us down paths that are not for our highest good or most productive self.
You touched on so many things that
I know, I'm sorry.
have follow-up questions on. But no, first of all, I absolutely agree with you that the sort of dark moon's shadow self work has been like becoming more popular in recent years. But previously, nobody was really talking about that. That wasn't a topic that people kind of wanted to address. And that maybe that comes from a place of being scared of that and being scared of what you might find. So could you tell the listeners a little bit about like what even is the dark moon? Like what sort of energies are you even working with at that point? Because I think most are familiar with the full moon.
Sure. Yeah, no, we definitely are, right? That's kind of, I feel like that's the basics. Like that's where we start, right? We all are attracted to that full moon energy and that sense of light and magic, if you will, that comes with that. So the dark moon really is that period of time, just like the full moon, it kind of has a 3-day cycle. So it's really that period of time where we see that very last little bit of sliver in the sky until we see that new sliver come back. And the apex of that being in that midpoint where it is dark and we don't have the moon in the sky per se. But even though it doesn't appear that the moon is there, it is like, and you can see it if you really look, you can see it, especially through a telescope or that kind of thing. There's this kind of faint outline, but it's really about that energy of self-reflection and going deep and getting into that, sort of painful place that we all have within us, where we've, maybe stuffed emotions or hidden things or put things from our past that we don't really want to deal with. And unfortunately, the downside of that is those cycles tend to repeat, right, in our lives, and we see them crop up in different places, or we repeat the same patterns over and over again. And in order to break some of those cycles, we really have to look at those things. And the dark moon happens to be an energy that is really perfect for that. Because unlike the full moon where everything is illuminated, right? The dark moon really asks us to dig deep and look in and turn inward to see what are those things that we need to personally work on? What is that personal work we need to do? And the energy itself feels very different too. When you're working with a dark moon, I kind of describe it in the book, but I feel like it's just so true. Is it's a very sort of a thick, inky kind of feeling energy. It's not necessarily light and bright, but it does move, and it's very fluid. It's a very interesting energy to work with in a really positive way. And of course, the purpose of that is not just to sit in that energy, but to have it help us really dissect those things and break those energies apart so that we can bring them back into the light in a way that's going to be productive for us, instead of us being succumbing to the cycle. We get to dictate what happens next. How are we going to free those energies up and use them in a way that is now going to be productive instead of that counterproductive piece?
And that really is an important part of the practice and personal growth in general, because you can't have the light and the full moon without the dark. It just doesn't exist.
The other fun thing that you get to do is work with a lot of dark moon deities too. So you get to work with those darker aspects. Like a lot of people like Hecate is one that's really popular with a lot of people. But there's a lot of others. The Morrigan is another. There's a lot of really great gods and goddesses that we don't, I feel like they're underutilized, we'll say, because we don't always work in those aspects. But when you are working with the dark moon, you get to explore this whole different sort of an energy that goes with that.
And you do cover that in your book. You have a whole section on the deities.
I do. Yes, I do.
I don't do any deity work in my practice, so I am really excited to chat about that, because those two that you mentioned, the Morrigan and Hecate, come up all the time in questions that I get, and I'm like, I have no idea what to tell you, but I can direct you to some great books about the topic.
Right.
Because they are just not two that I work with. Now, do they come across as like a powerful energy or a quiet energy? How is it to work with these dark deities?
So I think some of it depends on the person. Whoever, it's really, I feel like it's one of those things that just like every person has a personality, every deity has a personality, and it's really about what you need at that time. I have some friends that, tell me stories, and they're very powerful, and very abrupt and very blunt. And this is what you need to do and get it done. And then I have other friends who have encountered deity in a different way, in a gentler way. So I think some of it is, what you need, how you need to have that information presented to you. And I think choosing the type of deity that would work best for you is part of that journey. Meeting with different guides and kind of figuring that out.
Do you think that your book is accessible to beginners then as well, or is it a more advanced practice?
So I'd say generally speaking, it's more of an intermediate to advanced, in many ways. But what I tried to do was make it accessible to everyone, because I feel like there's value in it no matter where you are. If you're just starting your journey or you've been doing this for years, I think there's something for everybody in the book. I do feel like in the beginning chapters, I try to sort of map out for people, if they don't have a lot of background in the craft, to kind of map out like, what does this look like? How do I do this? And it's probably the most boring part for most people that are, more in that intermediate to advanced area, because they're like, yeah, okay, Kim, we've heard this before, and that's fine too, but I try to include something for everyone. So, if you're more of that intermediate or advanced, you're going to take the pieces, the products that come out of those first couple chapters and utilize those, but you're going to make it your own flavor for whatever, because it's not written for any particular, style of the craft. So you can use it for any, regardless of your background. So I think for people to be able to take that and then make something out of it. There's also work later in the book that I don't give as much explanation for, because it is for more advanced practices, people that have been practicing for a long time, who are going to take that information and mold it into what is most beneficial for them. So I try to guide enough without dictating or trying to mold too much, what the experience should be for people, because it is a very individualized experience, I think, for each individual.
Which is great to have some content out there that is like that, because there are a lot of beginner books and people are looking for the intermediary and advanced and sort of the what comes next.
Right.
And to get to that point, you really have to dive in and start practicing and pick sort of one direction to go down. Like the beginner books cover every topic under the sun. And then when you focus in a little bit more, like, okay, let's look at dark moon energy, let's look at shadow work, then it becomes a little more advanced.
Right. Because you're taking a very specific lens and saying, okay, now let's go deeper with this. Yeah.
Well, I would love to ask and chat about what your sort of history and journey was like in coming to the craft and in creating this book.
Sure. So that's an interesting journey. We could probably chat all afternoon about that journey, but I started looking into the craft around the age of like 12 or 13. And I won't tell you how old I am now, but it's been a lot of years.
Fair, same.
Well over 20 years. So I started looking into things and started exploring some things. I did go through some really difficult things when I was a teenager, later teenager, and I felt like I was really lost. So I started to practice. I had friends who were kind of into, the scene in general, and I started exploring, doing some things. I worked solitarily for a long time, and my practice sort of emerged initially from that. I feel like I've probably worked with the dark moon longer than I realize sometimes. So I started practicing and finding different things because of some things that I went through when I was a teenager. There was definitely a lot of residual trauma that I had to work through, and I needed a modality to do that with, that I felt was beneficial. And so those things kind of fell into place over many years. It developed over, probably a good 10 years. And I worked with other people that had a lot of good insights and ideas. And eventually I worked with a coven for a while that I had put together, of people who were willing to let me guide them and take them on these crazy journeys to see where things went, and how far we could push the limits, and what kinds of things we could learn from that. And what came of that was really the base for the Shadow of 13 Moons. And at the time, I had a friend who said to me, this should really be out there. It should be out in the world. And I was like, you're insane. You're insane. I don't think I could put myself out there like that. She said, I really think you should. And, I've always dabbled in writing anyway. But I started to, I spoke with my guides and I started doing some work around it. And I was like, all right, well, let's see where this goes. And the book, essentially, really the initial version of it, really kind of wrote itself. And the further I got, the further I realized that it really did need to be, I felt like, out there. I felt like there were a lot of people who probably walk around with this trauma and don't have a constructive way to move through it and move past it. And not just, when I say move through it, I think our tendency is to kind of ignore it, but rather to run headlong into it and come out the other side of it. you know.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know. So that's kind of like, I mean, a really short synopsis. In that time, like in between all of that, I had done a lot of training in different traditions, and I've worked with the Sisterhood of Avalon for a lot of years. I also trained with the Temple of Witchcraft, in conjunction with having worked on my own, and worked in my own covens and things like that. So yeah, a
Wow,
lot
so
of
that's like a
self-development.
lot of dedication and study in different areas.
It is, yeah. I love learning. I'm always about somebody teaching me something new.
That is fun. I know some people are strictly book learners and on their own, and
Mhm.
I'm one of those people. So I'm always interested to hear from people who have gotten together in groups and learned that way. I think that's fascinating. I've never done it just because like I'm such a, I don't know, like I have to do things for myself and like I have to read it for myself. I've never been able to pay attention into a classroom, so I've never like tried to learn from like a group setting like that. But it's so interesting to me that other people do.
Yeah, I'm 100%. I can relate to a lot of that because I am kind of that way too. But I find it, so I'm really bad also at sitting and listening to lectures. Like I have a wicked case of ADHD when it comes to that. Like, okay, after 10 minutes, I'm going, what else can I be doing right now? So I guess that was kind of how, like when we initially started working together, that was sort of what came out of it was, people were interested in what I was doing, and I was like, well, I guess I can show you. I don't know. Like, this is just me. This is what I do. And we got into this whole journey, and it was fun because it was a lot of hands-on. And that's, I think, the thing I enjoy most about working with other people in the pagan community is it's always a really interesting journey because there's always different personalities and there's always different energies that get brought to the table, and it's really fun to explore and experiment with that. I feel like that is an endless pool of learning.
Oh, yes.
But it's also very hands-on, which is like right up my alley.
And I think it would be nice to do some like dark moon work or at least have some support of people around because that could be very difficult work.
Right.
It's
Yes.
essentially therapy, and that's hard. And it's hard to do that on your own. It is something, you have to work through your emotions and things on your own. It's very personal, but it's nice to have a support system for that as well.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and that's one of the things I talk about too in the book is whether you have people in the pagan community and the witchcraft community or outside of that, it doesn't matter where your support system is, but it is important to have that really solid foundation because it is hard work. It's hard work and it tears you down, and you have to be willing or able to reach out to whether it's, a therapist in the traditional sense or your support team or whoever else. So I was lucky that in that particular time when we were really exploring some of those ritual aspects and things, I had, the covenant to work with and those people to come together every month and really kind of explore that.
Do you still do anything like that? Do you have any groups that you meet with regularly now?
So I would love to start doing it again. I don't currently. So currently I have a lot of friends, within the community, but I do practice primarily solitarily because in along my journey in the last 10 years, I had 3 children, and they're all in different age groups right now. Well, I have a set of twins that are in the same age group, but so my life was very consumed for a while with raising very young children. And they're just finally getting to the point where they're all older. I have one now that's in middle school, and the others are in elementary, and so um it's getting a little easier. I have a little more time to be able to dedicate to you know, exploring things with a group again and that sort of thing. So I'm hoping to in the near future, get back to that. I do some online groups like with Facebook and things like that, as far as like support communities and things, to be able to bounce ideas off of and explore different things.
That's what I do too. I like the online community. I think that's just how our world is at this point.
Yeah, yeah. There's benefits to both, I feel like.
Absolutely. So do you have anything in your practice that you do semi regularly? I don't want to say daily because I know with kids that's incredibly difficult to make sure you're doing something every single day. But is there anything you do regularly?
Yeah, there's a few things that I do regularly. So I'm an avid tarot reader. So that's one of those things I usually look to, for a quick thing in the morning, like about my day or what's going, what kinds of energies might present themselves. I also practice, I'm a firm believer in practicing gratitude. And also acceptance and forgiveness, so that is definitely part of my daily. I try to take a few minutes in the morning and in the evening to do that affirmation work around that those pieces of gratitude, those things, remind myself to um and also give thanks to the people and the support teams that are around me, in various aspects of my life. So those would be the things I feel like on a daily basis that I do without fail. And then, of course, there's a lot of anytime I have an opportunity to go out into nature and hike around or meditate or any of those things, those are always just great little magical moments that, can deliver a lot of insight.
Absolutely. Do you, at this point, do anything for every single dark moon cycle each month, or is it something like you until you have something that you need come up in your life?
No, I do. I honor the dark moon. I try to honor the dark moon, I should say, every month. And I'm aware, it's one of those I'm aware sometimes it is just a quick meditation or that kind of thing. Other times it might be a full ritual. It just depends on, kind of what's happening in my life at that moment and also where I'm going, in that cycle. So if there is just a one cycle thing that I need to look at, or is this a longer, as you get further along in practicing the dark moon, there's times where you might do a 3-month cycle, or a 1-month cycle or a 9-month cycle, just depending on what it is that you really need. So it just depends on, the work that I'm doing in a given moment. I was doing a lot more during the editing and revising process. I really kind of delved into working with the dark moon a little more ritualistically at that time, because I really wanted to make sure that the energies that I was bringing and introducing into the book really made sense to be there. So, there's times like that where I, will delve more deeply, and then there's other months where I feel like just honoring those, my team, and honoring the the moon itself and the energies that that brings, and just reflecting on, the past month and what I've brought in and what I've taken away, what might need to still go as far as, assessing those energies and figuring out what's working and what's not.
I think that's like a practice to every month. I wish
Right.
I was more regular about that. But I'm the same way as you. Like I sometimes turn to it more when there's something going on in my life or something comes up, and I wish that I was a little more regular about like checking in every month, and not just when there's a problem.
Right. I think that's our tendency though, as human beings, right? We get
Yeah.
wrapped up in all of the other things that are going on in the world. And sometimes we forget to, that's why I try to make it that, like, even if I just, it's less ritualistic and I'm just spending a minute to honor that, kind of just doing like a check-in.
I know I am trying to be better about that. And I say that on the podcast all the time. And I'm like, don't just turn to witchcraft when there's a problem. You can also do witchcraft for like joy and happiness and just celebration. And that's not just
Right.
for the Sabbats. You can do that all the time. And like I don't even take my own advice.
Right. I will say one of the things I've learned since having children is how to find the magic in the moment and have it be less ritualized. Um, I think previous to having children, there was all this time, there's plenty of time and energy to spend on that kind of, having more elaborate, times for rituals and things like that. And kids really teach you to reorganize and think about and recognize, really, the magic that happens in a moment without us even really acknowledging it. So yeah, anyway. Sorry, I'm like digressing.
No, I love it. Do your kids participate in anything with you? Any sort of spells and rituals?
They do actually. So that has been a more recent thing. So so I'll tell you a funny story. When my son, when my oldest son was in first grade, he thought it was hysterically funny because we've always been very open, about just our practices and, what our beliefs are in the house. So he decided to tell his teacher that she needed to be careful because his mother was a witch.
Excellent. Love first grader.
Right. I was like, well, okay, so let's have a conversation about when it's appropriate. It was very funny, but I actually knew who she was. So it was hysterical because she said to me, I just have to tell you that your son decided to tell me that I had to be careful because you were a witch. And I said, oh, well, you better watch out then.
Oh, kids, kids are the
It
best.
was very, very funny. But yeah, so my kids have always known, witchcraft is definitely part of our life. We celebrate the turning of the wheel. We talk about the deities and all of those things. And my son actually is just, my oldest is just at a point where he's coming of age. So that has put new requirements in his life. But so they participate in all of those things. We don't push them to believe any particular thing or believe in any particular way, because I feel like that is something they need to choose for themselves as they grow up. But we certainly introduce the different ideas. I'm also very big on allowing them to explore anything. So if they ask me about Catholicism or Christianity or Judaism or any of those things, I'm very open with them about my knowledge. And I always tell them, like, look it up, check it out. I can't tell you what fits for you. But so we do rituals here, and they are participating in those, and they're starting to learn, the different pieces of, casting the circle and calling the quarters. And it's really a fun and eye-opening experience to do it with children. Because again, you find those really interesting moments. We did a ritual recently for Imbolc, and there was, I forget exactly what happened with the candles, but there was something going on with the candles on the altar. And one of my twins looked at me and he said, "Hey, Mom, clearly the goddess is happy with what we're doing."
Oh.
And I was like, well, okay. It's like, it's fascinating to me. They're just children in general are just very accepting of, like, the world is what it is, and yeah, they'll tell me little things all the time that I'm like, okay, go for it, buddy. Like, if that is, if that's how you feel, if that's how you're being directed, then sit with that, so I just thought it was cute, that he was very aware of that.
That's sweet. I mean, kids are smarter than we give them credit for.
Oh, 100%. And they feel
Oh,
energies in ways that we don't even anticipate they're going to. And then you're like, oh,
oh,
cool.
yeah, absolutely. My mom always tells stories like from my childhood of like my quote unquote imaginary friend who was like a young girl who would only visit me at night, like through my closet. I'm like, Mom, that was a ghost. Like, come on. They never
Right.
talked about like during the day, like never played with, only came like once a month. I was like, Mom, that was a ghost. Like, just
Right. It's interesting that you bring that up, because my kids, that's another thing we don't, shy away from in my house. And so my kids will tell me, like, hey, Mom, there's this dark figure kind of floating through my room last night. I'm like, oh, okay. Did it bother you? No. All right, then we're good. So it is funny how, like, right, if we don't shun them from telling us about things like that,
right. Yeah. And don't brush it under the table. Like,
right.
it's just imaginary or something to fear.
Yeah, discount it in some way. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I love stories like that. There's just like so much energy and things that they can pick up on. It helps us as well.
Yes, it does. Absolutely. Like I said, it's those moments. It makes you really stop and go, oh, it doesn't need to be a big moment. It doesn't need to be a big ritual. It can be sort of a mundane activity that becomes magical,
Which is my favorite type of witchcraft and magic in general. Like, let's just
Agreed.
turn this simple mundane moment into something magical. I don't need a big elaborate ritual.
Yep. I agree with you. I agree with you completely.
I mean, big elaborate rituals are fun, but I don't like the cleanup. So that's my reasoning.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yes. Yeah, they are fun, but it's a different animal, it takes a different level of work. So
Indeed. Well, if somebody were going to be diving into Dark Moon, Shadow Self, reading your book for the first time, is there any advice that you would offer, or something that when you started, you wish you would have known?
I think a couple of things. First and foremost, don't be afraid of yourself. You're dealing with yourself. It's just you. It's not, you are who you are, and the events that you went through that created those shadows are at this point memories. they help to shape you, but they don't make you. So I think that's one of those things that is really important. The other thing I would say is don't be afraid to try things. If it's what you feel in your gut, try it, because there's got to be a reason that you're drawn to it. If it's a particular stone or an herb or a ritual setting or practice, if you're drawn to it, there is no right or wrong. There's no concrete have to. It's really fluid, and it should be somewhat creative. I feel like when I first started working, I felt like I was in this like taboo zone. Like, this is probably not okay, right? That people do this. And this is like, feels completely normal and natural to me, but this is probably freaky to people. So, just that sense of it's not weird. It's not freaky. It's not creepy. It's normal. It's a normal part of that. And then the last thing I would say to people is just don't be afraid to take it slow. A lot of people, I feel like, rush headlong in and feel like it's all going to get done tomorrow. And the reality is it won't. And it's been there probably for a long time in your life, and it's not going to go away in a week. It's kind of like losing weight. I tell people I've been losing weight my entire life. It never works. No, it does work. But it's just that understanding that if you don't do the next ritual the next month because you're still stuck in the first part of the book, or you're still on chapter 1 and you did the thing in the activities chapter 1, but you don't feel like you're done yet, that's okay. There is no timeline that is, a have to. It's a want to. It's what you want or need in that given moment. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think we feel like sometimes in society in general, that we're constantly on this like hamster wheel, that we've got to race to the next thing, do the next thing, get the next thing right, and everything has to be perfect all the time. Shadow work is messy. It's really messy, and that's okay.
That's great advice. Yeah, I think we all suffer from that instant gratification where, we decide we want a milkshake and we can order it and have it delivered to our door in 20 minutes at 8:00 at night. Like, instant gratification where we see something on a commercial and we buy it, and Amazon has it here by 7:00 the next morning. It's tough to live in that world and then turn around and do all of that shadow work and just witchcraft in general and realize that none of it is going to be instant gratification.
Nope. And it all moves on its own timeline.
It really does. Which, is a lot of times is fun. It can be frustrating, but that's kind of like the joy in it is taking that time for yourself.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes, down the road, when that thing does come back around, you're like, oh, there you are
again.
But look, I actually needed you right now. I guess I really didn't need you 6 months ago when I cast that spell, but you got here, and you got here right when I needed you.
It's great to see how that works. I love watching that unfold.
Yeah, sometimes the universe knows better than we do, I think.
Oh, pretty much always. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here today and chatting about your book, your story, your kids, all of that. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. It's been great to come on with you. It's been a really fun afternoon, so I appreciate that.
And listeners, I will have everything linked so you can check out the book, dive into some shadow work if that's what you are looking to do. Highly encourage it. And I know that a lot of you have been asking about dark moon deities, so this is going to be right up your alley. And that is everything that I have for you this week. I will see you next week.
Need even more? Subscribe to Patreon and YouTube for exclusive bonus content. Order a themed witchcraft box every month through Witch Wednesdays on Etsy. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast. Find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.